G'day guys, Mike with the Outer Circle, and we have another Heresy Thursday. This time out, we appear to be getting another Exemplary battle. And, well, it's not an Exemplary battle, it's actually a compilation of existing Exemplary battles, which were, of course, free PDF documents of questionable balance, but I think good intent, that were updated and put out on Warhammer Community. And now they're going to be officially compiled into a paid-for book. And they're taking about 5 of these exemplary battles and putting them into the book. And they're giving us an additional one with the rules for Demon Fulgrim plus an additional Salamanders unit. This is quite interesting to see as a turn of events because, well, I don't think I wanted to see a retreading of the existing exemplary battles. I've spoken about that quite a bit. I think the correct direction for the Heresy to head in is to probably look at the Shadow Legions, Black Shields, Shadow Crusade, that kind of thing. But I'm not against it. I'm not against this approach. The question will be on price, because these are free PDFs. If the price comes in and it has, well, let's just say if it's pushing triple digits Australian, I think that's a bit too much for it. It really comes down to, it's a free document we've already had. How much are people willing to fork out basically for the exact same thing they've already got? And yeah, I'm not sure that it will win any friends on that count, because I reckon this is going to be the same price as Siege of Cathonia. That's not ideal. Now, an interesting thing to point out here is that there is going to be additional content in it. So it isn't just like it's only free content that's being given to us, but now in paid-for form. So I can forgive it in some regards. There is some additional new content in here. I mean, everything to do with Fulgrim, the new Salamanders unit. It also looks like there is going to be a Rite of War for corrupted hosts of Emperor's children. Maybe that ties into using Demons of the Ruinstorm. That would be pretty neat. But it's very strange because we're really getting into a weird place of the Horus Heresy, and I want to diverge from the original content of this video and just talk about a thought. And that thought is that the Horus Heresy has distinct phases. There is the opening phase of the Horus Heresy, Istvan, Kalth, Prospero, Cygnus Prime, that kind of thing. And whilst, yes, there are demons and there is a bit of chaotic stuff going on, there's very much just Legiones Astartes versus Legiones Astartes with all their Great Crusade war gear. There is very little in the way of demonic equipment. Now, as the Horus Heresy drags on, the rules start to change. Traders start to make more and more use of demonic equipment, demonic war gear, and the Loyalist Astartes start to figure out ways of fighting it. And so new units like Nullificators come along, different console types are created, the Librarius is brought back in many legions, and of course the Primarchs themselves are no longer the sort of shock and awe of how do we deal with demons. It becomes okay, we kind of know how to fight these things now. And then by the late stages of the Horus Heresy, the Trader Space Marines are pretty much Chaos Space Marines. They're not as warped yet because they haven't had as much exposure, but Horus's battleship is so possessed by the warp that even just transporting onto his ship causes the Legio Custodes, half of them, to be basically possessed by chaos and turn evil, because that's how much malign influence is floating around. I see this as very distinct and different stages, and I would like the rules to better sort of look at these stages. And with Fulgrim here, we kind of just jump to the end. Alright, this is pretty much, hey, here's how he is just before and at the Siege of Terror. That's fine, he's been this way since Angel Exterminatus, but thinking about it, it should be more like a game like Bolt Action, okay, where you've got like an early war, middle war, late war for like World War II. And it's like you're not going to have, King Tiger tanks rocking around in Poland in 1939, right? Well, same sort of thing here. In the Horus Heresy, I'd love to see more units that's like, okay, these are distinctly late heresy, very chaotic units, and we've adjusted the rights of war and maybe even the Legion traits accordingly. Instead, what we have is we have a weird mishmash of it's all happening simultaneously. And I don't know that that's the best approach for the game. And I say for the game because it feels like then it's up to us, the people who are playing it, to come up with all the rules of what you should and shouldn't be using and what you should and shouldn't do in this universe. And it's great to have that kind of liberation, that kind of freedom, but it does come with pitfalls because everyone's interpretation is therefore going to be quite different. And I don't know how I feel about it. I think that the Emperor's Children especially, and very corrupted Emperor's Children, that's a late heresy thing. That's the last third of the heresy, okay? And if they're at that point, I think that the Loyalist Astartes also need to be having tricks that are up their sleeve. And I would like to see more of the corruption, the fall to chaos. And it's been very badly portrayed so far. If you look at Siege of Chthoniya, this is taking place simultaneously with the Siege of Terra. And yet the Chaos Space Marines of the Sons of Horus involved in the Chthoniya campaign, they're supposed to be the not as corrupted because they don't believe in chaos itself types. Just being in the presence of Horus at this point turns people into chaotic arch-traitors, okay? We don't see any of it. We're not seeing Chaos Stars. We're not seeing an abundance of gold trim starting to creep in or anything like that. You can't tell the difference between Sons of Horus that are at the Siege of Chthoniya and if you put those same models at the Battle of Istvan. Except for the fact maybe that they're in Mark 6 power armor. So I know this is a long sort of side topic to the main video at hand, but I feel it's important to stress that I would like to see different levels of basically corruption happening within the heresy. And I would like to see the heresy go back and tackle, in Heresy 1, we barely got out of the opening stages of the heresy. We got the Dark Angels involved in the very last book, which is the Thramas Crusade. So that's basically the border between early heresy and middle heresy. We never covered middle heresy. We just jumped into 2.0 and we jumped straight to the Siege of Terra timeline. I think there is a very fascinating middle chunk there that needs exploring, and I would rather see it explored first, if I'm honest, because it's also ripe ground to get every legion involved. But anyway, back to this particular topic at hand. We can now look at Fulgrim Transfigured, and we have some taste of his rules here. Now, it's interesting that they've shown us two different profiles, decapitating slashes and sundering blows. Now, this seems to be catch-all, very similar to, like, say, Chinzar, or Korax, where they're, instead of trying to do all these different weapons, they're just giving them different fighting styles and say, hey, pick from this, and it symbolizes the performance, the functioning of this character, as opposed to this war gear has this specific consequence of use. And that's fine, I don't mind doing things this way. Now, his transfigured stat line is basically Horus's stat line. Interestingly, only movement 9. I say only, that is quite a lot. I'm surprised though it's not greater considering the wings and that kind of thing, but there might be rules based around that. We don't have everything yet. 7 attacks. That's a lot of attacks. 7 wounds. Strength and toughness 7. And maintaining an initiative of 8. All of that is pretty big. Also, I'm surprised that he's ballistic skill 6. So he very much, instead of getting a side grade, which I always thought Demon Primarchs were to regular Primarchs, I always thought it was a side grade because they are basically Imperial demons, already demon princes of the Imperium. Their corruption and fall to chaos is just changing them. I didn't know that they got this much better, but it shouldn't surprise me because this was what we saw back when the Gathering Storm happened and Magnus came out in 40k, and him and Gilman as well. and we got to compare their 6th edition, 7th edition 40k stat line versus their Heresy stat lines and see where they were sitting at. But this is very, very strong, and I'm hearing, in fact, we can see 600 points. It tells us right here, 600 points. That is awful cheap for this stat line, because this is a very good stat line. Now, what's interesting here is they've given us 2 different weapon types. The decapitating slashes, melee murderous strike 4+ at strength 7. That's going to kill a lot of stuff just instantly. It's a 50-50 chance whether or not it's just instant death on every to-wound roll that he makes. And if there's some way of getting something like rad grenades into close combat, then every strike he makes is going to be murderous against Space Marines, but even Murder Strike 4+, this is deadly to Custodes. There is a downside though, and that is, being its strength user, fighting other Primarchs, it's not really the ideal weapon, because they're all going to be toughness 6, 7, etc. And with your 7 attacks, you probably only going to do a couple of wounds. Therefore, you want something with high strength. And that's where Sundering Blows comes in. At +3 strength and AP 1. So strength 10, that is instant death to things like, well, Custodes, to Gal Vorbak, that kind of thing. And with Brutal 2, yeah, he can cause a lot of wounds. He can cause 6 wounds instead of 3 wounds. With Wrathful Blows, however, it's a limitation rule which limits you to making only that many attacks. So, interesting situation there, because if you're limited to only 3 attacks, even with Brutal 2, that's a maximum of 6 wounds you can cause. With the Decapitating Slashes, you can cause 7 with your base attacks. With perfect rolling, this is, of course. But with the Murderous Strike, against any multiple wounds unit, like a Contemptor Dreadnought, for example, you're going to cause D3 wounds, if you don't just outright kill it. So, oddly enough, Sundering Blows is kind of redundant, except for maybe when fighting another Primarch. Because the chance of that Murderous Strike going off and causing a lot of instant death wounds on a Dreadnought means I'd probably just use that against a Dreadnought. I don't know that with the Wrathful Blows 3, reducing the amount of Sundering Blows one can make, that it comes out as a very good, attack stat. So yeah, probably going to give that one the miss. But overall, seems to be okay where he's at. I guess it's a bit of an anti-tank attack as well. There is that, but it's not like it's got Sunder or anything like that. So yeah, we'll see. And of course, it talks about the other Exemplary battle stuff. So yeah, what do I think of this update overall? Well, as I sort of voiced in the middle segment there, I think there needs to be distinctive timelines to the Horus Heresy and to what units, rights of war, that kind of thing you can take. There is one hidden bonus here though, and that is that the Exemplary battles was treated by different people in different parts of the world as optional. Someone comes in and says, here's my Exemplary battles unit. People would sometimes say no. Oh, it's not an official publication. It's only in an online PDF published on their official website. Well, this clears it up. It's saying, yep, if it's in this book, it's a black book. These Exemplary battles are legit. These units are legit. So, yeah, that's a good thing. That's a handy thing. And overall, I'm interested to see what direction this heads in. But I think, personally, it needs to be a cheap book. And I mean cheap. I mean $60 Australian would be a fair price. I don't expect to see any change from 140 Australian though. And I say that because most of the content is already written, it's just being recycled, and they're paying for the book itself, as well as paying for that little bit of content around Demon Fulgrim. But hey, they're going to sell plenty of Demon Fulgrim, they're going to get their money's worth, so I don't feel too bad for them either way. Anyway, that's it for me. I'm Mag with the Outer Circle. as I said, I've got some 3D print videos in the works. I've got a review on some resin, some Sunlu resin coming up. I want to do a review on some terrain. That'll probably still go ahead. I want to get out a couple of days ago and talk about it before their Kickstarter finished up. I unfortunately ran out of time due to work circumstances. And I also want to talk about getting into 3D printing, both filament and resin, the pros and cons, updated for this year, and talk a bit about the devices themselves. So I think there is a lot of confusion right now for people, like what brand is the best, that kind of thing. And we'll go into that. I will give you some real consumer advocacy here and some actual information that is useful rather than just saying buy this or buy that. So I will give you the tools to make the decision for yourself. Anyway, that's it from me. I'm Mac with the Outer Circle. Thank you all for watching, and please leave your thoughts and feedback in the comments below, and I'll catch you on the next video.